This is me having a panic attack, like I used to have multiple times a day, every day. Except this time it was different. I was in my happy place and it didn't make any sense. I was climbing up the CMD ridge on Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in the British Isles. But to explain how I got here and what was going on, we have to go right back to the beginning. Now, I grew up playing in the mountains. I understand their rhythm, their sights and sounds, their hazards and risks, and their rewards. The feelings that you can only access when in their presence, and the views only attainable by putting in effort. I climb peaks all over the world, and over the last few years, as I fought for my life in the face of mental illness, the mountains have been my mentors and guides. Consistent in the turmoil, calm in the crisis, hope in the storm. So there was this one mountain that kept popping up in my dreams, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being called back to its slopes. I'd climbed it a handful of times, but every time I stood on the top of its summit, I knew deep down there was something more for me, a bigger challenge waiting for me to say yes. Then, in September of 2019, I had just finished a long-distance trail in the area when the opportunity came for me to climb. So I did. I said yes. And so, that was how my adventure on Ben Nevis began, and I set out for the top, feeling fit, energised and full of enthusiasm. And the weather was almost as good as you could get, a 90% chance of cloud-free summits according to MWIS.
Oh my goodness, it's freezing. It's 3 degrees Celsius. I'm in Scotland. I couldn't be any happier about it. I've just finished the Rob Roy Way, walking the trail, and now look at this spectacular weather. And guess what I'm doing? I'm headed up Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in the British Isles, 4,411 feet high. The cold is taking my breath away, but now it's just gone 8:30 and we are on the mountain.
It was invigorating to breathe in the crisp morning air and soak up the dramatic views all around. My plan was to simply go up and down via the main mountain path, but as I made progress, I could feel a vibration reaching my core that encouraged me to go in a different direction, as though the mountain itself was trying to tell me something. So, at the halfway lock-in, I texted my friend the change of plan, left the crowds behind, and headed out onto a new trail. I was going to summit via the CMD ridge. The walk through the valley to the CIC hut was simply heavenly, with the river roaring alongside and the golden light illuminating the landscape in a flaming brilliance. But something inside was wrong. My heart was in my mouth with anxiety, and I could feel all of my senses firing at lightning speed, causing dissociation and an element of confusion. I pressed on regardless though, telling myself it was excitement and eager to make the most of such an amazing opportunity. I reached the CIC hut feeling physically strong, then hopped over the river with a splash and headed up, very much up. The slope grew steeper with every step, but I breathed deep, trying to bring my mind back into my body. Yet, the higher I climbed, the more unwell I became, and the terrain was slippy with lichen and moss, and the rocks and boulders loose and unstable.
What are you doing? Get that foot there, you go. Right.
I started to talk out loud, to make sure I was making sound and sensible decisions, but it was very slow going, and I completely lost track of time. I felt wired yet numb, stimulated yet afraid, and stuck between continuing upwards and turning back. I felt trapped and distant from my usual emotional companions, but whenever I stopped, I would reach out to them, joy and courage, and they would hold me tight. I knew they were cheering me on, even if I couldn't hear them above the noise of fear.
Oh, I can hardly breathe though. Feels like I'm at altitude. My chest is so tight with panic. Just have to really calm. Well done, Abbie, you're doing good. You're doing good. Just keep the focus now, girl, come on. Oh, breathe. Deep breaths. Well, here's a ridge. Can you see that? We made it to the ridge.
I was shaking with adrenaline when I finally reached the ridge, falling to my knees in relief and gratitude. I now knew that I could make it to the summit, So I took my mental illness by the hand, rather than slinging it over my shoulder, and we walked together. Vulnerable, yes, but belief pumped through my veins and my heart soared at the adventure. And then I spotted something amazing.
Person, there's someone over there. Hey, person, there's a person. Oh my gosh, there's a person. There's a person ahead of me. Oh, there's a lot of people. There's people. Frick, you're okay. God, there's people. Believe it or not, I'm having fun. I'm grateful for my life. You know, as somebody who dices with death a lot because of my mental health, it amazes me how scared I get when I feel vulnerable. It's gonna be okay.
The walk along the ridge was spectacular in so many ways, from the endless horizon of mountains ahead of me to the volcanic bulk of the Ben shadowing my every step. I made good progress, now feeling alive in a way that only the mountains could inspire, and connected to the landscape on a deep and primitive level.
My jelly legs are slowly receding, which is so helpful. You really need strong yak legs to work through the mountains, and I like yaks, so I don't really mind having yak legs. Because the word yak, oh my gosh, that's such a great word. Yak. Yak, yak, yak. Oh, I've lost my mind. This is the bounce back from a panic attack. You end up going on about yaks.
Eventually, after many oohs and ahs, the path turned upwards towards the summit of the Ben through a bouldery landscape with no clear path. Even though I re-entered the cloud, I could now see clearly, as my mind was free from struggle and I was back in partnership with myself. I made it to the summit, though I wasn't able to see much. But I didn't mind. Instead, I felt truly humbled by the lessons I had learnt from my ascent, and I now understood that this experience had to happen, that this was why the mountain had been calling me back. To pull me out of my head, to remind me to trust my instincts, and to show me what I'm capable of. It had created a space for me to show up, to be vulnerable, and to grow. It had taught me that fear is always going to come along for the ride, that it will hustle for a front seat, fighting with courage and excitement, making as much noise as possible, but only ever saying one thing: stop. But I realised that the fastest way out of fear is through it, that you never get stronger if you only do easy things, and that dealing with mental ill health doesn't have to stop you from chasing your dreams. If anything, it opens the door to a richer way of living, one where you become a participant in your life, not just an observer, and where you forget about the summit and revel in the climb.